Howdy, welcome to May's MasterCast. I'm Shannon Deere, the Assistant Dean of Graduate Programs. I'm here with our host, Ben Wiggins, and we have a special guest, Brontee Khatemi. She is one of our former students who was in Ben's class and actually is an integral part of this podcast getting off the ground. We had hoped to have her as a co-host, but she is not living in town anymore, so we're just going to have her as a recurring guest as often as we can get her. But Brontee's here with us today, so Brontee, we want to know a little bit more about you. Can I start off with our icebreaker question that we use on every episode?
Yes, please.
Which is, what is your favorite superpower?
I would say flight.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. Either flight or like teleportation. Oh my gosh. That'd be
Wouldn't
great.
teleportation be nice?
Be amazing.
I would go see my family a lot more often.
Same.
Yeah.
Yep. Because I'm from California and all of my family lives there.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
That would be really nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Tell us more about you. So where are you from? What were you doing before your MBA and what are you doing now?
Perfect. I am originally from Southern California, Orange County. I moved to Texas about 10 years ago and went to 2 years of high school here. So throughout that whole process, I learned about Texas A&M, went here for undergrad, and then got into private education, worked in private education for 2 years, and then MBA. And now I work in supply chain at a small window hardware supply firm.
Awesome.
What was the most important thing you discovered about yourself in that whole process? So let's start all the way from when you moved to Texas all the way, say, up through now, but specifically with an emphasis on the MBA program.
I would say having to move from everybody I knew, family, friends, everything, all the way up until I was about 16, it really taught me that, you know, I knew I was outgoing before, but now I know that that's a big strength of mine is I'm very outgoing. I love to meet new people. Being put in that environment where I had to, and I realized this is where I shine. And that was perfect for our MBA program where we were so close as a class and as a cohort.
Mm-hmm. And you're back in town for Brisket Bowl this weekend.
I was.
Who did you run into while you were here?
Well, it was a wild sighting. But I saw Dr. Metters driving his ops man car, which he drives like what color is that? Teal Camry that has a license plate that says ops man on the back. And what's funny about that is when we were in the MBA program the first semester, all of us kept taking pictures of that car, not knowing that that was Dr. Metters. And we would see it all the time. Oh, look at this guy. You know, he must be a professor. And we found out it was Dr. Metters.
That's great. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Metters, I just saw him in the wild for the first time myself. And that man is jacked.
He is.
Jacked.
Dude is, I felt very inadequate standing next to him.
He has not always been that jacked. This is a more recent life goal he has set for himself. Y'all had Nick Bailey in your class who was basically a
jacked
bodybuilder.
as well.
I mean, did he do competitions or was he just really jacked?
Yeah, I think he was just really jacked because I asked him where he worked out once and he said, quote, "I don't work out." And I said, "What?" I don't
know if I buy that.
No. So what he did was he worked out a lot and ate shopping carts worth of meat.
Yeah.
So much meat.
Yeah, he really did. I mean, he was
so much
protein driven for sure.
Exactly.
But one of my favorite experiences from y'all's class was we do Follies, which is a big event and fundraiser for an organization here in town called Camp Life that does camp for children with disabilities. And it's a camp day. They get to go rock climbing and horseback riding and all kinds of camp things that accommodate their disabilities. And so they get full access to camp. But they were raising money. And so the faculty members donate experiences. Y'all all know this, but I'm going to tell our listeners, but faculties all donate experiences like dinners or different things. And I donated a day at a trampoline park, which was fabulous. But Dr. Metters did a challenge where it's a live auction. So whoever bid the most money gets to challenge him to 3 physical activities. One was a bench press, one was a 5K, and the last one was a racquetball game. And if the student beat him at all 3, they had to win at all 3, Dr. Metters would give them $1,000. And so Nick Bailey accepted the challenge, and actually his wife did not, Dr. Metter's wife did not know that he had done this, that he was going to give away $1,000. And so I think somebody from y'all's class sold him out, and she was a little taken back by it, but he challenged Nick. And were y'all there for that?
I missed it, but
it was so funny.
We had basically in one of the group chats, like a live tweet, similar to that of the events. Like, it was like round one, Nick wins. It was great.
Well, and Nick beat Dr. Metters, but one of our other faculty members, Dr. James Abbey, he competed too. So Rich let all the other faculty come for the different events if they wanted to. And I think that James even beat Nick by a lot. And then Dr. Metters had little trophies, and one was like he had just replaced the what is that called? The plaque on it. And so it was like a ballerina. And then there was one that was a cow for like FFA judging. And
funny story about the trophies. Me and Ellen picked them.
Oh, did you?
We were in his office one time, and he goes, "Hey, ladies, I really need your help." I don't remember who we were even going to go speak with, but he comes flying by and he goes, "I need your help." "Oh, yeah, sure. What do you need?" He goes, "I have to get trophies for this event that I'm doing with Nick. What do you think?" And I believe we tossed out the idea of ballerina, and Ellen had done FFA stuff. And so she said FFA trophy or 4-H trophy. Well, bowling was one of the ones we thought of.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was one. Well, it landed well. I'll say that. It landed really well. It was so funny.
That's awesome.
So wait, I was not up to speed on all this. I knew the challenge was happening, but Nick won all three?
No, he did not. So Nick had actually, the weekend before, he had run the marathon with, I think, Brock and maybe Emily and Kate. There were a lot of y'all's class that ran that marathon. It's a little shout out to our friend Chris Field, who will be on the show at some point, but it's the BCS marathon here in town that raises money for Mercy Project. Check out all of those things. But they had run the marathon the weekend before, and then on, I think the challenge was like a Tuesday, maybe a Wednesday. And so they ran a marathon. Nick won the bench press against Dr. Metters, but then the 5K, Nick phoned it in. I mean, a bunch of them that had run the marathon decided to run this 5K. And so Dr. Metters said, I was only a few feet behind him, but Nick was not even trying. And so he was like, and he had just run a marathon. So Nick smoked him on the run and had a lot left in the burners to go. And then Dr. Metters, I think, beat him pretty badly on the racquetball. That was where Dr. Metters had a ringer in there to protect his $1,000, I think.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, it was a fun event. And all the crazy antics we do in our program, right?
Yes.
Well, one more real quick, Metters. Over the summer during my internship, we did something called sales and operations planning meetings every month at my company. We still do. And our VP of supply chain at the time, he took me through that whole process, which was great. And it's very essential in a lot of companies. They don't always do it. And so he told me, hey, if you want any of your professors to come by, I'd be happy to talk to them. I sent an email to Dr. Metters, and he said, I'm coming up there to visit some family in Plano. I'll swing by. And he came and talked to my VP. But in the class that I had before, this was pre-workout Metters. He showed up at my office, and I didn't even recognize him. He'd lost so much weight and gained so much muscle and everything. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. But he went walking by my desk, and I didn't even recognize him.
Good to see you, Brontee.
Exactly.
And actually, I mentioned Dr. James Abbey, but Dr. Metters and Dr. Abbey pitched the elective to y'all's class around Halloween. Do y'all remember that?
Yes. However, Dr. Abbey was not there. It was just Dr. Metters.
Okay. So they were a pair that day for Halloween. They had dressed up for Halloween. So tell them what they were dressed up as.
They were Hans and Franz. It was an SNL skit, I think. So they were these big bodybuilder looking dudes with these like full one-piece sweatsuits.
Here's
and
a
like
present for your girlfriend.
And like these big fake muscles. So he showed up by himself on Halloween to pitch this to us, and all of the other professors are there. They're not in costume. Dr. Metters is like, well, okay.
You're like, this class could be fun or terrible. I don't know.
Turned out to be an amazing class.
Tim Dye won the teaching award that was voted on by students, despite only teaching an elective that was taken by 40% of the class, maybe less. Is a great teacher. Shout out to Dr. Dye. But so I remember seeing his face when Metters walked in, and Dr. Dye, who I had not yet met at the time, looks up and goes, he did the head tilt thing. Like, I could tell like his brain was just sort of fracturing.
Like, how am I going to sell my class? Or I'm either going to, like, this is going to be the easiest sell or the hardest sell with this guy dressed up in a bodybuilding suit.
So let's talk a little bit about the program. Obviously, it's a very rigorous program. So Brontee, as a classmate of mine, you and I learned fairly closely with each other, especially in the first semester. But over the course of the entire program, what was the most significant way that you transformed during that window of time in your life?
One thing that was a big deal for me was rising to the challenge. In the beginning, I don't want to say I was complacent. I took it very seriously, but I just wasn't at the level that I should have been. And there were some instances where I felt I did as well as I could. And there were other times where I definitely felt I didn't. And in admitting that to myself and then pressing forward to do much better in the second semester and third semester, that was the biggest thing that made me transform was, okay, this is what I'm actually capable of. And here's where I've been phoning it in. So now I know what my limits are.
Phoning it in just in the sense of not putting in the time?
Exactly. It was probably... I just had problems with my priorities, I think. I tended to study the things I really enjoyed and not so much the things I didn't. I was sort of in denial about them. So I would put them on the back burner while I was studying the things that I enjoyed and making connections with people, which was a huge, important thing. But my schoolwork should have definitely taken precedent, and figuring out those priorities was very important.
I think that's a challenge that a lot of students have. Probably when they come into any MBA program, I just can't speak to that. But certainly in ours is that, one, you've been a high performer in your life already, or you probably wouldn't be coming to an MBA program. But then everyone in the room is a high performer and the level is just different. And likely you didn't have to try that hard in undergrad. And so you're thinking, hey, I can bring this same level of commitment to this MBA program. And it does hit students or kind of shocks them a little bit at first. And you were surviving, but you really did learn to thrive after that. And that was something really cool for me to see about you. And what I think is important about that experience of learning kind of what you can do, what this level takes, is that it doesn't end in the MBA program. A lot of people think, oh, well, I have to try really hard for my first semester because it's hard. Well, no, you have to keep trying really hard, because when you sign up for an MBA, you sign up for an MBA level job with MBA level expectations when you graduate, and it just doesn't end. The challenge doesn't end when you graduate.
That's exactly right. And that has been such an important thing going forward in my new career, is knowing, okay, these are, this is my level, and knowing when I can be putting in more effort and what I'm actually capable of. I feel like before the MBA program, I didn't have a really good idea of what I was capable of.
Was there a watershed moment that you saw something or thought something or heard something that made you say, okay, it's time now? And broadly, the question is what made you brave? What made you rise to the challenge? What made you say, okay, things need to be different now?
Yeah. Our, Shannon, can I talk about this?
Yeah.
Okay. I think you know what I'm going to talk about. Our MBA program has very rigorous academic standards that you have to meet. And I did not take those seriously until I started to do poorly in a couple of classes. I got a couple C's, and going into the mini-mester, which is after our winter break, we have a mini-mester, we do 2 classes. I had to do well in both of those classes or I wasn't going to be able to continue in the program. Oh. And that was really the point where I had to kick it into high gear. And I learned big time about myself that, it shouldn't take something like that to make me put in the effort that I know is there for me to succeed.
But on the other hand, maybe it should or shouldn't, but in this case, it helped you decide what was really important to you.
Yeah, it lit a fire. And I thought this program I think that's what it was, is this program meant so much to me. I didn't realize how much it meant to me until I was about to lose it because of my actions. So it was perfect.
Some people, you squeeze them and they focus. Others fold.
Exactly.
It's just the truth.
That was a big lesson I learned from that is it should not take to the point where it's, life and death for me to show what I actually can do.
I remember the conversation that we had that day, we had multiple conversations, but I remember specifically a conversation when we said, here's the terms and conditions of you staying in this program. And we were in Amber's office, who was the associate director at the time. And what I remember was knowing that you were very capable of doing this. But what I also remember, and we actually mentioned you on a previous podcast because you have positivity in your top 5 strengths. And it comes out very much. And I think especially at that time, it was coming out a lot. And so you were presenting this very positive front of everything's okay and it's going to be okay. And this program is great. And I'm so glad to be in it. And all of that was what made you so well liked by everyone around you. And it was also...
Besides me, of course.
Right. Ben really just can't stand Brontee. It's what made people like you. It also, I think, gave you a little bit of I don't know if it was a false sense of security. There was something there that it was like, yeah, good. I'm glad that you're positive and you think this is all going to turn out. And now I need you to make that happen. I need you to put the action behind making that happen. Match the action with the attitude, right? That was kind of...
You nailed it. Honestly, that's exactly what it took. And I hadn't thought about it in those exact terms, but you're exactly right that I was so positive. I was casting this rosy glow over everything. It's all going to be fine. It's all going to work out. Everything works out. And that wasn't the case. I had to really be the one to step up and, kind of not necessarily push my positivity aside, but apply it in a different way to make myself successful.
And we can talk about this someday, but with every strength, we do the Clifton strengths, and with every strength, there's a shadow side, right? And we were seeing that shadow side in that moment that, yeah, we love that you're positive because it certainly makes our job easier. But we also, and the other piece of that was, we want you to be positive. We also need you to be realistic about it so that you can tell us what help you need, right? If you're always saying, this is good, it's okay, I've got this is going to be all right, and not saying, hey, I believe this is going to be okay, but here's what I need from you to help me get there. That's really important too.
Exactly. You guys did a great job coaching me in that moment, because I think there would have been a lot of things that you could have said where I wouldn't have taken it as seriously as I did.
Yeah.
And it was really important. I took it very seriously, but it wasn't soul crushing to the point where I was like, well, I can never do this. It didn't turn into that. It turned into, you can do this, but you need to step up.
Yeah.
Push that positivity aside or drive it somewhere else to make yourself successful in this program.
That's awesome.
Was it scary?
Yes. Yeah. It was so scary. And that month, it's about a month, the mini-mester was really stressful. It was very stressful. And I'm the kind of person, I don't show stress very easily. That was terrible. It was very, very stressful. But it's something I obviously survived and got past, and it was okay.
What was the most important habit you picked up or change, like adjustment you made to how you handle your daily life? Was there a thing you could point to that you could say, you mentioned earlier, like some of it was just doing the work and spending time on stuff where you weren't as strong, but is there a more specific thing that you could point to that where if a student were struggling, you could say, think about trying this, think about doing this? Was there a thing you could point to?
Absolutely. The thing for me was preparation. I was putting in the, bare minimum for the most part on preparation, thinking, I got this, I can sail right through this. And that had been the case in undergrad. I was able to put in pretty bare minimum and do well. And that was true for sure in high school and at my job before. So I was not really used to having to go that extra mile of preparation. And
is that before class preparation or was that
before class?
Yeah.
Yes. And then of course for tests too,
right.
But the before class preparation, it kind of falls into line for tests after that point because you have everything to look back on. The other thing is I'm a very collaborative person. I found a group of women in my case, they just happen to all be women, that were super supportive, and we all helped each other study. And they were definitely a big key to my success, finding a group of people who were just as driven, maybe even more so sometimes, so that I could look up to and strive to be like, and who, encouraged me. And I told them everything. I was super open and honest with them. Like, look, these are the stakes right now, and this is what I need. And can you guys help me? And they did.
Yeah, that's nice. I know, too, one of the questions I have for you eventually is what impact do you think that you two had on this program, or what are impacts that you had on this program? But I know one of the things that both of you together did was going to your professors and saying, here's what we need as far as additional practice problems and additional help. And I think that's something that is really hard for a lot of students to do. And that I mean is advocating for themselves based on what they need. So and I think it's hard for a couple of reasons. One, as much as our professors most of the time aren't intimidating, there is still a power dynamic there, right? And so some students feel uncomfortable going to a professor, period. And then certainly going to a professor and admitting some kind of vulnerability. That can be really difficult, but I appreciated that you all did that on behalf of yourselves and your class to say, here's what we need to be successful. And to a point, every single one of them said, okay, to a degree. They might have said, okay, but here's how we're going to do that. Or, but they were willing to meet you with what you needed at that time. And that's because our professors are great, but it's also because you all were great at being able to advocate for what you need in a way.
One thing that pushed me in that direction was a conversation that you and I had very early on during orientation in the program. You were were on me a little bit about having my phone out during lectures. So I came to talk with you after that, and I said, I need to, I'm not a good lecture learner. This is something that we've talked about on the podcast as well previously. I'm not a good lecture learner. And this is something that I'm probably I need to grow beyond that, but also I need to acknowledge that it is a weakness for me, and sitting in class and taking notes is never going to be my strength. And so what that then led me to realize about myself was I only start learning. I really don't start assimilating information until I have to apply it. And so practice problems were really necessary for me, not because one thing that changed for me in the MBA program relative to previous education was the most important thing wasn't getting an A. It was making sure that I was learning everything that I could possibly learn. And so I realized during this process that I learned best when I had something to push against, if that makes sense. And if I was in a situation where I was just sort of like kind of having to track the information and not sure what I had to use it to move, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It was really difficult for me to sort of build the model in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Totally. Y'all actually hit on a lot of, so my PhD is actually in education and human resource development. And I really am interested in how people learn and how their brain works. And y'all have hit on actually some real science of learning, right? That application is so important, that the transference of knowledge. So can I take this knowledge from you're talking to me about a theory and apply it to a different situation, apply it at work, apply it to this set of practice problems? All of that is really important parts of learning that professors often want to get right and sometimes do and sometimes don't, and sometimes do in the big picture and don't in partial things. And I think as a learner to know this is what I need, this is what I'm going to go seek, this is what's going to help me to focus and not be a distraction to other people in the room or whatever it is. Those are really important things. The other thing that is interesting hearing y'all talk about that is this, as a faculty member, the balance between challenge and care is really important and really, really hard to get right. So, for example, I have to know going into that conversation with Brontee, I have to know her, maybe not her strengths, but I have to know something about her to know how I need my message to land, right? Because I don't want Brontee to walk out of that conversation and go, I can't do this. It's too much pressure. It's too hard. I can't do this. I don't want that level of stress, but I do want the level of stress that gets Brontee going and motivated and moving and doing the things that she needs to do, right? Or, even the conversation with you about the phone. I don't want to have that conversation with you, period, because it's not easy always to get feedback. But I want to say, hey, Ben, do you know how that looks to other people, which is so hypocritical of me, by the way, as we know, because we've talked about this on the podcast so often. I'm on my laptop in every meeting, and because otherwise I'm flipping out and like, can we move this along? But
that was one thing that made me listen to you,
right?
Was you said, when I said, look, this is just a weakness of mine, and I need to, before we go any farther, I need to acknowledge that. And you said, hey, guess what?
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. Which also is a way of saying, nice try on the cop out. And you have to learn how to, adapt to it, as I have to learn how to adapt to it, because I can't just blame it. It's you called me out the other day on, in a good way, I said, but I don't really like to relax by just sitting around. I really want to be on doing two things at once. And you said, that's fine if that's how you're spending your time by yourself. It's not so fine if that's how you're spending your time with other people. And it's the same. We can just hold each other accountable on this issue.
Mm-hmm. Somewhere Professor Krychek is smiling right now.
Somewhere. The other piece, I'm going to have to think on this for a second. Oh, the other piece that Ben mentioned that's interesting is this not trying to just get an A piece of learning that I think is so important. And I think if, Brontee, you were shaking your head when he was saying it, because it is a shift, right? And I just need to learn how, as much as I can, and hope, and likely it will, the grade will follow, right? And so one of the things I think that students can think about that drives that is, I remember, when you're at work, a 90 is not enough, right? A 90% on a work project is not enough. On a class project, you're like, yeah, nailed that. Let's move on. But on a work project, that feels terrible, right? Because you've got 10%, even if it's a 95, you're like, oh, didn't nail that one. So I think that's really important to think about. I need to learn as much as I can. I need to do as well as I can. And there's balance in there, right? Like you can't get 100 on everything. You can't even get a 90 on everything. Do the best that you can. But if you're doing the best that you can and learning as much as you can, that's really what's so important and translates so much better at work.
True.
Yes, I agree.
A lot of the way that this tied together for me was the two best pieces of advice that I got in the program. We've also talked about this before, were from Dr. Devers during Admitted Students Weekend back in April. This would have been April 2 years ago, so 2.5 years ago now, where she said, MBA students come in wanting to show how smart they are and to focus on outputs. Instead, you should focus on inputs. Mm-hmm. Be thirsty to learn, be a sponge, take in all the information that you can. And then I forget who gave us this advice during orientation, was the most important factor once you sort for GMAT score and previous GPA, previous work experience, all that, the thing, and obviously everybody comes to class. So then the most important variable that will determine your grade is time spent with professors in office hours. So then when you put those two things together, and I know about myself and I'm learning about myself that I have to have something to sort of push against in order to really start learning, it was a natural evolution to go to the professors and say, may we have more? Mm-hmm. And that wasn't necessary with every professor. Almost all of them responded favorably. And the inspiration to do that was in part when Raheem Siraj shared his practice problem set with us before the first statistics exam in Kumar's class. And so in accounting, going into the final, we didn't have a practice problem set. Professor Reese, who was a wonderful professor, had said all of the practice problems in the book are good. And the issue with that was there were so many problems in the book that to try to do them all would have been completely overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And so I went to him and said, could I select practice problems and have you approve them and then send them to the class? And he said, sure, I don't see why not. And so I did, and he did, and we did. Yeah. And it seemed like it was helpful to the students. And
the other important piece of that was that you didn't go to him and say, can you do this thing for us? You said, can I do this thing? Right. And it's such a key aspect of even just taking responsibility. Even if you had said, can I write these practice problems and you do this? It makes, professors are human too, right? And they need to know that you're taking responsibility, that you're putting in the effort. And I think that's what y'all demonstrated really nicely in that.
Something I learned from previous work experience. I learned this when I was working in football from our offensive coordinator at the time, Les Kenning, and then learned it all over again when I was in Hollywood, was make it easy for your boss. Mm-hmm. Like if you can set it up to where all they have to do is look at it and say yes, or say yes, but change that, you're so much more likely to get a positive result than if you put more work on their plate.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So
exactly. And I kind of going back to what you were saying about the practice problems, one thing that you did really well, Ben, was besides, doing the work and saying, hey, can you approve this for us? The fact that you said for us instead of for me, I think made a big difference in our MBA program. And it's way easier to advocate on behalf of the class and sound really positive and seem like you're really involved for the professors and actually be really involved for the professors. And it's so important to not go in there and be like, well, how can I get ahead of everybody? And that luckily in our class was really not a problem. We all really liked each other a lot, and we didn't have a problem with people being cutthroat. And that was something that it worked really well in everybody's favor.
It helped everyone. And I give credit to Raheem because he took the first step on that. And I think everybody was sort of hopeful that was the way that it would go, that we really would stand for those values on the wall over there. But when he took that step, it was very easy to be the second mover and then to say, okay, we're all in. This is how it's going to be. And anybody who doesn't want to do it this way, you guys go over there. Mm-hmm. Because the university and the business school says, this is what we're about. And this other guy has taken the first step, and it was good that it meant something coming from Raheem because he was someone that our class trusted, and it was obvious that he was going to be a leader early on in the program. People looked to him to set a precedent, and he did a really good job and set a very favorable precedent. And from there, it was, it was much easier to make the second move.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't do this with your class, but with the last two classes, we started having them set their own culture code. So we'll talk about this on the podcast at some point because we're going to have the one of the leaders who kind of facilitated that process for the current class come and talk about it. He does a fantastic job. But we literally just turn them loose in a room for a couple of hours and say, okay, set a culture code. And, it's something that companies have, but set that, come out of the room and tell us if we'll give you a couple weeks, but tell us what it is. And one of the things that the way that they described that phenomenon you're talking about was collaborative excellence, that they want to excel as a unit and not as an individual. And while they kind of coined the phrase or put it in their culture code, it's been a long standing culture in the Mays MBA program that it is not, while many of us are competitive as individuals, we are not competitive with each other. Our competition is all of the other schools and not competition with each other. And we see that manifest in some incredibly beautiful ways. And so just this last week, we had a meeting with our full-time MBA advisory board, which is made of a lot of executives. And we got to hear from one of them on the podcast, Mike Thompson, and the class and the student who was helped facilitate, and the student who now presents the culture code for the class on behalf of the class. He did that with the advisory board, and they were blown away by that collaborative excellence piece because they know it to be so true for the Mays MBA, that it really is this group environment, and how important they're seeing that become for their companies, that people who are just in it for themselves are not going to succeed, and they really need people who are in it for the collective. Did y'all see that in different tangible ways? I mean, you talked about that with Raheem, certainly. I know I have some examples.
Oh, yes.
But
yeah. Especially when we were looking for internships and jobs.
Yes.
If someone ran upon an opportunity that they knew they weren't interested in, or they had already tried for it, didn't work out, something to that extent, immediately to the group me or WhatsApp that we used, boom, here's an opportunity, everybody go apply for it. And that was something that was a total lifesaver for tons of people in our cohorts, that we were super collaborative on positions. We weren't very competitive with each other, and we helped everybody get one.
Ray was pretty good, was particularly good
amazing.
about that. Ray's out.
That's exactly who I was thinking about when I was saying that.
Yeah. Even after even up to a few months after graduation, he was still sending stuff. He really did yeoman work.
That's cool.
On that.
He did. Can I ask a behind the scenes question,
Yes.
Shannon? What made you guys come up with the idea to give the new classes a culture code, or to have them come up with their own?
That's a good question.
Yeah. So I think in any organization, you have a culture, whether it's intentional or not. And in any class within an MBA program, you have a culture, whether it's intentional or not. And I actually was reading a book by Frederick Bachman. It was a novel, not a self-help book. I usually like to read for just the fun of it, but Frederick Bachman's books are amazing. I think he's a Swedish author, and they've translated them into English, but they're so cute and they're really fun. And his one of my favorites, so I'll give him a shout out. He doesn't need it. He's a best-selling author, but one of my favorites is I think it's My Grandmother Told Me to Tell You I'm Sorry. And it's all written, like, the narrator is a little girl, and he's a male author. And that's really hard to do. I think, there's some great authors who have narrated female voices, but it's tough. And so he does that as a little girl, and her grandmother is quite eccentric. But anyway, there was one about, it was a pretty deep book. It's called Beartown, I think. There's two of them, and one of them for sure is called Beartown, but I think they both are. And it's a series, but it's about a hockey team in a very cold climate, I think in Sweden. But it's about a hockey team, and there's an issue with sexual assault in the novel, and I don't want to give any of the novel away, but there's an issue with sexual assault in the novel, and what the line in the novel that really struck me and then inspired us to do this culture code was, culture is as much about what you tolerate as what you encourage. I think I may be paraphrasing that a little bit, but culture is as much about what you tolerate as what you encourage. And there were a few times, especially with y'all's class, where I felt like I didn't always have those tough conversations, and yours was minor about the phone, but I didn't always have those tough conversations with, hey, do you understand how you are impacting the culture of your class with some of your classmates? And I thought, you know what? I could do that. I need to step up and do more of that. And I certainly did and have with future classes, and to kind of learn that lesson. But I also need the class to decide that this is going to be their culture, and they decide what they're going to tolerate and not tolerate, and hold each other accountable. Because at the end of the day, I am not going to work in May's graduate programs forever. Or I'm not even going to be the full-time MBA director forever, as we know, because I'm transitioning to a new role. But you all will wear the brand of the Mays MBA forever. So it is immensely more important to you that people live the culture than it even is to me. And so why not make that the class's responsibility? And so it really was, this is going to be your code. And when you're not living up to it, you get to call each other out on it, because y'all agreed as a class that this was who you were going to be. And so, and we do from time to time, we'll pop it up and say, hey, are you living this? We had an issue with our students get an Aggie ring. It is much coveted. And they're flashing their Aggie rings. You cannot see them, but they are proudly flashing their Aggie rings, which are beautiful. And there are 2 ring days right now. There's one for domestic students and one for international students. And it has nothing to do with us intentionally segregating those 2 groups. It's just because of the way that the coursework falls for international students versus domestic students, for legal reasons for complying with international student services or federal government. But so it creates two different classes. Well, their class, they said diversity and inclusion was part of their culture code, this last class that's about to graduate. And so I said, okay, so then order your Aggie rings later so that everybody can get them at the same time. And they were like, no. Like, we don't want to order our Aggie rings later, because that's 2 months. We could have our Aggie rings on campus and at football games. And I said, okay, then you're not living this, or come up with something else. And so they got their rings, but they came up with some compromises of celebrating their rings together at the same time once everyone had gotten them. Some students did opt to wait. So we had a larger majority of students as individuals say, hey, I'm going to live that code. And I don't blame the students who chose to get their rings earlier, because they really did at the same time say, I want to go ahead and get my ring, but I do want to live the diversity and inclusion part of our culture code. And so I'm also going to wait to really celebrate that once our whole class has gotten the ring. Mm-hmm. So it gives us some legs to stand on to say, but you said this is what you're going to do. And right now you're not doing that, or we're not seeing it. So what are you going to do? How are you going to modify that?
That was a really excellent example, because that was something that I already had my Aggie ring, right. So I didn't have to get mine. But when I found out that the international students had to get theirs later, I was like, oh, well, we should all just get ours later. Yeah. And I remember saying that to a few people, and they're like, no. But that being said, we did a very similar thing where we had one big ring dunk, and then when the international students got theirs, we hosted another one. Mm-hmm. And that was a blast. Yeah. It was such a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But it's still tricky, right? And it's still a challenging issue. And I actually naively, this was a mistake, thought I could not tell the students that there were 2 ring days, and that they were even eligible to order it. This was so ignorant of me, but
I think I know what you're going to say, and I was going to suggest that. Why don't you just tell them to all order it?
I did. And then they found out, and they got so mad at me, and I was like, well, that was really dumb of me. I mean, in hindsight, that wasn't smart either. Like, just tricking them
I wouldn't have had the foresight to see that at all. I would have thought, oh, that's perfect. We'll just tell them.
Well, I didn't have the foresight either. I did.
What I mean is, I totally understand.
They found out.
It's not you who goes and finds that out. We all like.
No, I would have been like, whatever.
Yeah, no.
We
know,
you're not the person that goes and digs for it.
We know which classmates would have gone and found out.
I have like 5 people running through my head right now.
We don't need to name any names.
No, but they did. They found out, and then I was like, well, that and honestly, even if they hadn't found out, that's not the best approach because it doesn't give them the chance to make a choice to live up to the expectation, right? It's just tricking them into living up to the expectation, which is not great either. So
agency.
Yeah.
It's in How to Win Friends and Influence People. Carnegie says, give the other person a great name to live up to, give them ownership in things, help it be their idea, that sort of thing. But, and more often than not, when you give people the opportunity to do that, they come through. Every now and then they disappoint you.
Which is on them and not me, right?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely right. Yeah. So after all that, Brontee, what impact did completing the program have on you and your family, career, organization, et cetera? What do you think were the 1 or 2 or 3 most important things that the program did for you and yours?
Yeah. On a really basic level, I got a business education, and I did not have that before. I studied science in undergrad, and I had gotten into business a little bit in my previous job, but I thought, I'm really interested in this, and this is something that I'd really like to learn more of. And going through the MBA program was amazing. I got a phenomenal business education, not just a business education. And it also, because it was so challenging, and I talked about those, expectations and the standards that I can pull myself up to, I know that going forward. And in looking for positions, I know I can do that. That's something that I can do. Or in my current position, I know that what I'm capable of and what my limits are much better than I ever did before. I know now this is a project that I can take on. And I'm also much less afraid to take on new things. I was a little bit afraid of failure before. Now I know it comes with the territory, and I just try things more, and that's invaluable.
And
you make more money.
Yeah, to say the least.
I think one of the really good things that's come out of the push for diversity is that now in 2018, it is standard fare for women to be saying things like that to each other all the time. You'll make more money if you do it this way. If you take more chances, do it this way. Don't be concerned about what people may say about you. Like it's really good. Just be excellent.
That's a good one. And one thing I learned about women in particular in the MBA program is that a lot of times we'll count our chickens before they hatch. And we will go into things thinking, well, I'm going to get married in 5 years. So I'm not sure if I want to pursue this opportunity, or I'm planning to have kids in 3 or 4 years. So I don't know and holding ourselves back because we plan ahead way farther, even though those things haven't materialized or they're not even visible in the future. And that kind of thing is really, really important.
So what impact have you been able to have as a result of completing the program? Oh,
absolutely. So especially in the company that I'm in, it was small to begin with, but then we were acquired back in March, and which was about 6 months ago or so. And from there, we had a lot of consolidation, and which we knew was coming. We just weren't sure to what level. So we had about 40 people working in the corporate level. We're down to about 17, and supply chain is me right now. So we had a lot of leadership. They moved on. We had some people also move on just because they were unsure of the changes, and I stuck it out, and I have really risen to that challenge of, you are the go-to person in supply chain. And even though I don't always have all of the knowledge, I know who I can talk to get to the answer that I need. And I've just really stepped into some things like, okay, I don't really know what I'm doing here, but I'm going to give it a shot. And hopefully things will work out, or I'll go talk to somebody, run it past them, even somebody who's not in supply chain. Just those kinds of things. I felt like I've had a really positive impact in my company, just keeping things afloat.
I imagine that a lot more responsibility has fallen on you, going from 40 employees to 17, being the sole supply chain expert. I imagine more responsibility has fallen on you. How have you kind of navigated or negotiated that with the people that you work with? You know, I think a lot of times maybe my MO in my career has been just say yes as much as possible and then good things will happen. And I don't know that that's the best strategy. And so how have you done that, maybe successfully, not successfully, navigated the additional responsibilities?
Well, originally I was pulled into the CEO's office, and he mentioned all of the new responsibilities that could be coming to me. And I felt very overwhelmed by that question. And I told him, no, that's not something that I really want to do. I don't think I'm ready. I told him, this is my first role in supply chain. I don't think I'm ready to be making these huge decisions for our company. And while he did understand that, it's still a lot of it fell onto my shoulders. And so from there, what I have done is made my limitations very clear to everybody who talks to me about, I guess, raw material is a really good example. I really have no experience with procuring raw material. Now I do, because it was just, here it is. Nobody else is around to do it. You have to take a look at this, and you have to help finance with it. And so I've worked really closely with finance, learned a lot on that front. But I've always been very upfront with them with, these are my limitations. I'll give it my best shot. But, I've been very, very, very honest going forward. And I think that's very important. But yeah, you do have to learn to say no. And I've instituted a very strict, do not send me requests after 4 p.m. Oh. They're not going to happen until the next day.
Yeah, that's a good, very practical, tangible boundary, right?
Exactly.
I mean, to set for yourself. I think I love that you have the confidence to be able to say, this is a limitation that I have, right? That takes a lot of confidence, actually, to be able to say, there are things I don't know how to do. And P.S., I'm good enough at all the other things that I do that it's okay that I don't know how to do that. Right. And we're just going to have to work through that is really, really, you said one of the impacts of this program was that you can do it. I think that's a beautiful manifestation of that, because you know that you can do it enough to be able to say, that's not something I know how to do. Let me figure it out. Or let me be very clear that I don't know how to do that.
Exactly. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Shall we move to some rapid fire questions?
Let's do it.
Okay. So we've talked a little bit about adversity that you've faced. Is there other than that, is there a failure in your history that you consider particularly valuable other than the adversity that you dealt with early on in our program?
I'm gonna have to think about that one.
Okay. Let's move
That's always my example is I got bad grades and I got over it.
Right.
I got your interview
That's
answer.
100%. It's my star story.
Right. What do you think is people's biggest misconception of you?
Oh, that's a really good question. That just because I'm young, I will act impulsively. I get that a lot. And I'm not sure. Well, maybe it may not be a youth thing. It might be, but I think it probably
it
is.
Has something to do with it.
Might also be sexist.
It may be a little bit.
Might also be sexist.
I didn't want to throw that one out there. I think it's more to do with my youth. And I also look a lot younger than I actually am. And that's a huge problem. But that's definitely something that I deal with, is that I'll be impulsive or that I'll make decisions on the fly. And so I get a lot of people feel like they have to manage my decision making.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really good one.
How do they, so is there a particular way that you see people trying to manage your decision making?
It manifests as like micromanaging.
Uh-huh.
They'll say, well, send me this every single step of the way. And at this point, or, send me a deliverable every single step of this decision making process. And at this point, especially because I've been flying solo for the past 2.5 months without a supply chain manager or like someone right above me to run things by, I've gotten really used to just, okay, I'm going to pull the trigger on this because I work with international suppliers. And so I need an answer from them overnight kind of thing. Or I'll work with them at night to make sure I have a full conversation with them and nobody else is awake. I have to literally make those decisions on my own. And so, yeah, that's the way, is micromanaging for sure.
You'll have your deliverable, bro. It'll come in at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
But
you want to read it then? And honestly, I have told people that is I'm going to have a conversation with China tonight, and you can be on that conversation if you want, but it's going to happen at midnight. You going to be awake for that? No. So then I'm going to go ahead and make these decisions. Yeah. And I have managed that expectation for sure. And I've said, listen, I've definitely sat people down at my company and said, listen, I promise you, I'm not going to spend $5 million tonight. We'll get through it.
I like to tell my wife, so I have a small esports business and there are a couple of people that work with the organization that are overseas. And so I like telling my wife in a very important voice that I have a conference call with Sweden tonight. They're awake right now, babe. I know that it's late. It's very early for them. But I have to go call with Sweden. I have to go call Sweden right now.
I'm sure Maddie so impressive.
Yeah. Maddie.
She's a big fan. Big fan. I have to.
She just rolls her eyes like, okay,
it's probably whatever.
I have to go call Korea, my love. I'm sorry, but it's important.
I need to pull that on Tim, I think. So he thinks I'm like so important.
You should. If you could have anyone as a mentor for one day, who would it be?
Shannon Deere.
Oh,
what?
Yeah. I was, you know what?
Good.
I was going to finish that question by saying, and it can't be Shannon.
Really?
I was. And then I decided, I'm not going to do that.
I've always thought that. And honestly, I didn't see that question before you said it. So I've always thought that, Shannon.
I think I'm blushing.
No, really, starting with that conversation you had and how impactful it was with me talking about, this is the expectations for moving forward in the program. I thought that is someone who really knows how to work with people. And I love working with people. You're an excellent example.
That's really nice.
Man,
it's just true.
It's a little dusty in here. So what is your fondest memory of TAMU?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's hard for me to even pick a place to start because I've been here for so long, but
it could be undergrad too.
It could be undergrad.
Yeah, anytime.
And I think MBA was so much more fun. I was pretty square, for lack of a better word, in undergrad. And MBA was just like work hard, play hard for me. And I loved that. But I would say we went out on Northgate a lot. And I never had an undergrad, not once. And just the crazy shenanigans over on Northgate were a blast. They're so fun. Oh, wait a second, though. I do have a really good one. I may get a little bit misty, so bear with me. But the day that I don't know if you remember this, but I was walking around in the hallway and I was so nervous finding out about my grades for the mini-mester. So nervous. Like, oh my gosh. And you sent me an email and you said, I was like, Shannon, please, I need to know something. And you sent me an email back and said, I can't tell you over email, but you're going to be very pleased. And I literally
That's basically telling you.
Yeah. So I knew from
Don't
that.
fire me.
No, so I knew from that, that I had at least done what I needed to do. And I was in the women's bathroom when I looked at that email, and I walked out and I ran into Caitlin Syracusa, and I literally collapsed in her arms crying, like in the middle of the hallway, and I just couldn't. And she thought I had gotten removed from the program. And so she starts freaking out. I couldn't even talk. I was like, Kate, I can stay in, I made it.
Oh my gosh.
And
awesome.
That was just, oh my gosh. I was so happy. That was a really great memory.
I feel like such a bad friend now. I didn't know this was happening.
Well, I was pretty open with a lot of people, but I didn't tell everybody. And I'm not sure why. I told a lot of people, but yeah, not quite everybody. Yeah. And I wish I had.
Not that important, Ben.
Yeah,
Ben. Clearly.
Jeez. But I think after that point, I told like almost everybody just because it was an interesting experience. I told a lot of the younger students, like the student, not younger, but the students coming in, I told them about it too. Like, this is what can happen. So you better be careful.
Yeah. I want to be clear that there are not very many dismissals from our program.
Right.
But there is a really high standard, and you do have to live up to it. And that is for a lot of reasons, but because we don't want students who we are doing a service for students, and we don't want to do a disservice to students, right? We don't want to put students in situations that they can't handle and things like that. But also, I mean, the big issue is that you all now carry the Mays MBA brand to your employers. You represent us, but you also represent each other. And so you all don't want students who don't carry that legacy while going out. So, it's a tricky balance of holding people to the standard. And then it's that challenge in care I was talking about earlier, holding people to the standard and also giving them a safe place to make some mistakes and
to learn
things well and to learn from that. Yeah, for sure.
Well, definitely. I never have had any ill will toward the program for the fact that I struggled. It was what it was. Yeah. And I am still very appreciative of those high standards, especially because I was able to achieve them.
Yeah. As most students do.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Were you and Tim dating in undergrad?
Yeah, we started dating in high school. Right after I graduated high school. He's a little bit younger. Wow. So he was 1 year. He was still in high school. We started dating. Yeah. And guess who asked him out? Me.
Oh,
I did the asking out.
I like that.
It's so scary. I don't know how you do that. Like, guys, it's really scary. So I have so much empathy for guys that ask women out.
It's funny because you, like, at first, when you're in, I don't know, junior high or high school, like, you just sort of, like, I think the way dating happens at those ages is it just sort of like kind of happens organically. And then all of a sudden we're going out, or we're like, I'm going with her. Yeah, we're talking.
Yes.
But then what you realize is that, it's like you face rejection, and there's definitely something to that. I mean, it's not nothing, but then what you realize eventually is that you regret the times more that you didn't ask, and then you lost the opportunity or whatever. And so you just realize that it's better to find out what the answer is.
It's worth the rejection.
That's how I felt at the time, especially because I was like 17. What can go wrong? But it was, at the time, I was very, I just said I'm not impulsive, but I'm super impulsive. And I just called him and I said, hey, maybe I even texted him before and said, hey, you need to call me or something like that. I don't remember.
You need to call me.
Yeah. It was
like it's an emergency.
What? Yeah, especially because we were friends, so we were pretty tight. But we
need to talk, Tim.
Exactly. It was we need to talk. We aren't even dating. Anyway, I called him and I picked up the phone and was not nervous. And then as soon as he started talking, I was like, oh no. And I went and I was in my garage at my parents' house. And I was just like, I was literally in in like the fetal position on the ground talking to him. I was like, do you want to go out sometime?
That is so cute. Tim is so great, by the way. I will say partners are such an important part of our program.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have the partner cohort, which we'll probably talk about in another episode, but just partners who can kind of get together with each other and get together. But families are such an important part of our program. But I always love getting to see him at all the different events and stuff. And
well, he really loves MBAs.
Yeah.
Especially ours, because they're pretty great.
Tell him to come get his MBA. We'll take him.
Oh my gosh. No, he'd do great. I already have talked to him about it, but he's really dead set on that PhD.
Oh, well,
so
those are good too.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to stay up to date on our latest videos, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to receive notifications. If you're in a rush or on the road, you can still join us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. If you want to learn more about us or our guests, please visit our website at mays.tamu.edu/podcasts. Also, please check out Mays Business School's academic programs. They're the sponsors of our show, and you can find them in the description. Thanks, and gig 'em.